Didn't know. So.
Shalom, this is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat, Israel, and I want to welcome you to our Tour for the Nations and Women's Gathering. I just want to tell you all how thankful I am for you for a little sense of normalcy in the week. There's so many things that are not normal, and I thought, well, this is one thing. We've been getting together every Shabbat, since I think September. So this feels good. It feels like, yeah, this is what we do. The more things I think that we can do that are in our control, the better. Tonight, after this broadcast, I'm going to my first Zoom room birthday party that one of my friends is having. So this is our new normal. We're just making the best of it, making lemonade from our lemons. But I did want to tell you how much I appreciate all of you that, Angela, for you for asking me to do this, because it helps me just feel like there's one thing in my life that's just going on as normal. We always talk about that our Torah portion coincides with what's going on in the news. And so here we are again. We have just come into the hardest book of the Torah to read, which is Leviticus. And I know for me, I would get this great idea that I was going to read the Bible from, and I would start in Genesis and it would all be going good. And I would get into Exodus and it would all be going good. And time after time, I would get to this book of Leviticus and I would just close the book and I would be like, I don't know what I'm reading. What happened to my story? It was so good, and now it's all just real technical. And today I saw this, and I think everybody has this problem, because it says, on the day of the final judgment, when Hashem will decide the fate of all of mankind in the valley of Jehoshaphat, he will ask every Torah scholar whether he learned every part of the Torah. And if he admits that he did not learn the book of Leviticus, he will be reproached with the words, "My son, why did you not study this book of Leviticus, which contains the laws?" And it just goes on and on. So you get reprimanded if you don't study this book. But lo and behold, I listened to so many teachings on this Torah portion, because this is the week that 2 years ago this week is kind of like my spiritual birthday. And so, whatever, I think you know this, that we have a system where we read the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Torah, through in a year. And so every week there's a parsha, and each parsha is like 4, 5, 6 chapters. And so you have a birthday parsha. You have the parsha that your birthday falls in. And so when you're 13 and you have your bar mitzvah, your bas mitzvah, that's the portion where you do the half Torah. So I kept wondering when my birthday was going to be, when my spiritual birthday was going to be. And lo and behold, 2 years ago, it was this week. And I kept thinking, there's so many other more exciting Torah portions. And when I saw that it was going to be the first book in Leviticus, I was like, no way. The book that I've never been able to read, the book that I've never been able to understand. But then I heard the neatest thing, that this parsha that we are in this week, my birthday parsha, for my spiritual birthday, because my real birthday is during Hanukkah. But this is the week that I converted to Judaism and I had my mikvah. And so I heard a teaching, or many teachings, that this right here, where we are right now, is the heart of the Torah. And this right here, where we are right now, is when they put a curriculum together to teach children starting at 3 years old, they start them with this parsha. And it's like they start the 3-year-olds in Leviticus. So I was really excited to find out that my parsha is the heart of the Torah, and that it's the parsha that they start teaching little children. And the reason, what the sages have come up with, you know, if you were putting a curriculum together, what would you think would be the main thing that you would want to start teaching children? You know, I think it's every parent's nightmare to think, you know, you're going to raise that kid and they're going to turn out to be a brat. You know, nobody wants to have that kid. There's a Hebrew, no, it's not a Hebrew word, it's actually a Yiddish word called a mensch. And a mensch is the kind of guy that you want your daughter to marry, or is the kind of guy that you want your son to grow up to be. So everybody, like, the highest compliment you can give someone, you know, is to tell them that their kid is a mensch. And so the opposite of a mensch would be someone maybe with, like, a brat, or someone with narcissistic qualities, or just somebody. A mensch is somebody that, it translates to maybe someone who's a gentleman, someone who's sacrificial. Okay, you don't want it to be your kids when you see, you know, grabbing the last things off the shelves, hoarding. You know, you're hoping, we're all hoping that we raise the kid that puts others first, that's into sacrificing, that's able to share. And so our sages, when they put the curriculum together, they started with the portion on sacrifice. Our 3-year-olds need to learn to share that bag of chips. You know, for them, that's a sacrifice. So it starts young. We don't want our kids, you know, there's so much talk now in this generation about kids having this sense of entitlement. And so it's unbelievable to me that right here in Leviticus, I'm going to read you like a sentence and a half. And in one sentence and a half, you don't see this unless you're trained to see it, you have eyes to see. So, I mean, I could read this and not, it has to be taught. So our sages teach us that there's secrets in here, in this Torah. There's things to look for, and by looking at the first sentence and a half in this book of Leviticus, they've come up with how to keep your children from becoming a brat. So I'm going to show you what it is. So here's what it says. This is talking about God, of course. It says, he called to Moshe. God spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man from among you brings an offering to God. Okay, sentence and a half, and that's all we're going to talk about, because there's a lot there that we can learn as parents, that we can end up with children that become a mensch, and our daughters are the kind of women that a mensch wants to marry. You know, I think I told you one time there was this woman that everyone kept telling her she was a narcissist, and she was so worried that nobody was going to want to marry her. And someone finally suggested that she go and talk to the Rebbe. This is years ago. And she made an appointment with him to talk to him in New York. And first she wrote him a letter and she told him her problem. You know, I just have narcissistic tendencies and nobody's going to want to marry me and I'm never going to have children and my life is just going in the wrong way. What am I going to do? So when she had her meeting with him, you know, she said, well, did you get my letter? And he's like, yes, I read your letter. And she goes, well, what am I going to do? And he just said, well, you need to quit being a narcissist. And that's what repentance is. That's what getting it right means. When you actually change, you know. And so she just looked at him like, well, what do you mean? Like, how do I? And so he gave her real practical things she could do. She was going to school, so he said, you know, when you're in the lunchroom and you get up to get yourself a drink or you get up to get a napkin or something, ask everyone at your table, can I get you something while I'm up? And then just every day be thinking about others and asking others if they need something from you. And so she did, and little by little she lost her reputation as a narcissist. People began to see her differently, and you know, she got married and had children and lived a very happy adult life. But we don't want to raise that child that is self-consumed, that child that's thinking that they're entitled. Okay, so here's what we learned from our third book of the Torah, in Leviticus. When it says that God called to Moses, the word that it uses is Vayikra, and it has a at the end. When you can say Vayikar with no a at the end, or Vayikra. And the most interesting way that I've heard it put, that I've never forgotten, was that it's an affectionate word, like a husband to his wife. You would say Vayikra, the husband talking to his wife in a very affectionate way. If you're going to say Vayikar without the a at the end, that's just happenstance. That's just somebody you don't really have any affection for. That's somebody you really don't even necessarily want to be talking to. And in a couple of chapters from now, we're going to see how the evil prophet Bilam wants a conversation with God. And he doesn't really deserve to have a conversation with God. And so the word that's used there is the Vayikar without the a at the end. So when God was speaking to Moses, and he told him to write this down and to use this affectionate word Vayikra for God speaking to him, Moses didn't feel worthy, and Moses was like, no, that's okay, we can put Vayikar. And God's like, no, we're not going to put Vayikar, we're going to put Vayikra, we're going to put the a at the end, because I want everybody to know that my relationship with you is very affectionate. And so Moses didn't know how to handle this, because he was very humble. And he wasn't the type to, you know, go put on Facebook, look, I had an encounter with God, you know, God loves me, God talks to me. You know, he was very humble about the fact that God was talking to him, and he felt even kind of like, no, like we can't say Vayikra. And God says, so what they settled on was that they would say Vayikra, but the a would be a very small, diminished a. So we always talk about in our Torah that there's all these little, like every space has a meaning, every dot, every comma. If the letter is really oversized or if the letter is really small, our sages can tell us that you have to look at this stuff. There's a meaning here. So what we learn and how we can apply this to parenting and raising our kids is that Moses was the humblest man that ever lived. And so it's a trait that we have to teach our children. Like, of course we want them to have self-esteem. You know, we never want them to not, you know, we don't want a kid going around hanging their head and feeling bad about themselves. Of course we want our child, but it's a delicate balance to have a child that, yes, on the one hand, he has self-esteem. On the other hand, it's balanced with his humility. So this is really tricky for a parent to get this right. You know, having a child with that good self-esteem, but also having a child that has humility. And one of the best ways that we can teach humility to our children is to talk about all the blessings we have. Like to say to the child, you know, there's some kids that have never ever had a birthday party. And to just let this child know that if you have a birthday party, wow, you are blessed. Look, you got a birthday cake. Wow, you are blessed. We need to, right away from the time that they're little, get rid of any of this entitlement thing. You know, like, think about your blessings. Think about what you have, which so many children don't have. And in this day and age, it's so hard. It doesn't seem like it was as hard for me raising my kids, because as much as I would have wanted to spoil them, I couldn't. I didn't have the money to. So this, and I wonder now, I almost feel like, wow, it's probably actually even harder to parent when you do have the money. And you know, when you go through the store and you're pushing the cart, and I didn't have the kind of kids that threw stuff in the cart, because you know, we were like counting our pennies, and sometimes we'd get to the, you know, the end of the deal, and she'd tell us the total, and I'd have to figure out what to put back. So my kids knew that. They were very aware of, you know, they couldn't just start throwing stuff in the cart. But not my grandkids. I mean, you see kids now, there's just this, they know their parents have the money. Their parents have a lot more money than, you know, they had when they were growing up. So now it's something where you can spoil them. You have the means to spoil them, but you have to hold yourself back from creating a monster, you know. And so kids, when they get to be 17 and they're getting their permit, you know, right away they're thinking, you know, my parents need to get me a car. It's just like a normal, natural thing. I get a car because I'm 17. And I heard the story of this one grandmother who saved and saved and saved, and she wanted very much to buy her grandchild his first car. And so she presented him with the car, and he said, "Oh, Grandma, you didn't have to do that." And he was very thankful, but it was like a shock for others to hear, because most of the time kids are thinking, yeah, of course I get a car, you know, I'm entitled to a car, whatever. But for a kid in this day and age to say, oh, you didn't have to do that, I could have shared with Mom, you know. And they were like, well, how did that mother do that, you know? You need to be teaching this class. Show us how you raised a kid that was so grateful and didn't have that that entitlement thing that kids have now with the what their parents need to do for them. You need to get me a phone, and then when you punish me, I'm going to go in my room and I'm going to get on my phone and I'm going to tell all my friends. Which, you know, just we live in a different age, and so I think it's actually a lot harder. And so one of the things, you know, here we are. If you have small children, you can know that the Torah expects us to start young, to start when they're 3 years old, with this just a mind shift of I'm expected to share. I'm expected to be a giver. I'm expected not to just take. I'm going to just grow up knowing that, you know, maybe if we have company for the weekend, back in the day when we used to have company, maybe I have to give up my bed. I have to give up my room. And so it's just good. It's just good for kids to be raised to know, to be sacrificial and to be humble. The best definition I ever heard of humility was a racehorse, a very powerful racehorse, accepted the fact that he had to have a yoke or a bridle on him. He accepted the yoke of the jockey, and he realized, so if we allow ourselves to have the yoke of the Torah, to have the rules, to have the guidance of God and His laws, then this very powerful racehorse can totally reach its potential and can win the race because he's very in tune. He's one with the jockey, you know, yoked together with the jockey, and the jockey says, you know, go left, go right, go fast, go slow, whatever. He's yoked up. So that's the definition of humility. Not a bucking bronco that's, you know, whatever, I'll do what I want, you know. It's like, no, I realize that for me, this racehorse, to reach my potential, I have to be yoked up to the jockey. We have to be yoked up to God and His ways and His word. And this is a good definition of humility. So this is one thing our children have to learn. So it says here, okay, so we noticed that in that Vayikra, God was very affectionate with Moses, but there's a little a. So Moses was very humble about it. Then he said, when a man from among you brings an offering. Now there's a way to say man that you could just say ish, but that's not the word it used. It wasn't ish, it was Adam. So our sages teach us, Adam makes us think of the very first man, Adam. And that's the word that was used here. And so what we get from that is that Adam was, when he brought an offering to God, he wasn't competing with anyone else. He brought his own unique offering. So one of the things that we need to do as parents is we need to see the uniqueness in our children. And there's a proverb that says, train up your child in the way he should go. And each of our children, are going to have a bent. They're going to either be comedians, and be really good at making people laugh, or they're going to be good at math, or they're going to be good in sports. And I heard this story of there was a grandfather who was very good with his hands, very good with woodworking, mechanics, and none of his children took after him. And then he started having grandchildren, and none of the grandchildren took after him. And then finally, he saw the potential in one of his grandchildren that was very good with his hands. And his grandfather was so excited, he built this grandchild a workshop, wood shop. And so this child started to thrive. And before that time, the child seemed like everybody else was good at certain things, and he had never found what he was good at. And he started to just blossom because he was really good at gardening and just growing huge produce. When he put his hand to it, he started doing it. He actually started to be really good at cooking. And so anything that was hands-on, he found his gift. And so that is one of the things that it's up to us as parents to help our children raise up a child in the way he should go. Raise up a child in the way that he's like this first man, the only man, the mensch, that is bringing an offering to God. And the best offering that we can bring, it's not when we're trying to imitate somebody else. It's not when we're trying to, wish we were somebody else. It's when we can just be totally who we are, happy about who we are, and give out of that. Give out of our true self and what our gifts and what we're good at and what we were created for, what we're made to do. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so we recognize the uniqueness in our children. It says you bring your sacrifice, not someone else's. Our mission is not to be plagiarizing. So there's a reason that they use the word Adam for man. A man from whom I would bring a sacrifice. And sacrifice is not really the word. It's the word that we want to say is to bring close. My husband today told me it's like a hug. And I thought, oh, okay. So when you bring an offering, it's like God's wanting a closeness from you. God's wanting a hug. God's wanting to, sometimes it's to restore the relationship if it goes wrong. Okay? But every morning they brought sacrifices, and we have something, when we get up in the morning, my husband always wants a hug. It's like we can't start the day without that hug. And it's like, God is like that. He's like, when we get up in the morning, one of the first things we're supposed to do is come to Him and say our prayers. And we can't bring our sacrifices like back in the day, but we have a substitute now. We read about the sacrifices. We speak about the sacrifices. We say that we do it in our prayers. And so it's like we're starting the day right with God. We're coming before Him. We're getting our hug. We're getting the day started with a closeness, and that's what He wants from us. He wants us to just have that relationship with him. So it's, to say sacrifice kind of leads you down a whole different way of thinking. When you think of closeness, God's wanting closeness, God's wanting relationship. This is what the whole sacrificial system is all about. It's about closeness. It's about kind of like a workshop, about, you know, getting it right, if, you know, working on the relationship, having a closeness. That's what God wants from us. So one of the things that we have to teach our children when they, you know, when a little baby is born, it's not much different than an animal. Like, the baby is not going to think, oh, it's 2 in the morning, this is probably not a good time for my mom, I probably shouldn't cry, I probably shouldn't wake her up. The baby is just thinking, you know, it's not thinking really, it's just like, it's all about me, it's all about my needs, it's, you know, okay. So, but what we're teaching our kids is by the time they're 3 years old, they should be able to start, we should be able to start training them to be little human beings, to all of us have this little animal inside of us, this little, hopefully it's little, this little animal that wants its own way. And so, you know, I see it and I want it, and there's marketing people that know that we all have this, and they know how to appeal to that part of us. And so right from the beginning, we have to teach our children that we don't just throw everything into the cart that we want, and we don't always get that candy, and we don't always get that toy, and we have to be able to control that little part of us that just says, I see it and I want it and I should have it and I should not suffer in any way ever. Okay, so this is something that is just best if a child just kind of grows up with this kind of thinking, and so we have to help them. And it's such an important job as a mother and a father. It's a joint effort, because if the father's not there, you know, providing for the family, then the mother is distracted and having to do too much, and she can't just pour herself into training the children. So it's just this joint effort to bring up these children to be mensches and to be just the kind of kids we can be proud of, you know. So, all right, so let's just summarize. Oh, and another thing that we should always teach our children, you know, because they have so much, to always be thinking about giving to charity, giving 10%. Even when they get their little allowance, they should always know that there's always somebody out there that they should be having a little bank for, a little savings for. Always be thinking of somebody else. So here we are in Leviticus, and it's the book of the Bible where we learn how to keep our children from becoming brats, how to grow up and be a mensch, or a sacrificial person. So the first thing we want to teach them is sacrifice. It's important to sacrifice. It's important to share. It's important to be giving. It's important not to think that we should always get what we want when we want it. Okay? And so we need to learn how to pair humility with self-esteem. Okay? By talking about how much we are blessed. Let our children always know that they are blessed and they have so much. And even at this time when we can't do things, we're still so much better off than so many people. My husband talks a lot about the time that he went to Kenya, and he saw, you know, people around the garbage dump, and somehow they were laughing, they were smiling, they were having a good life, and they had nothing. And it just impressed him so much, like how little it took for them to just be happy and enjoying life. And so our children should know that. Our children should know how much they have and be appreciative. That's one thing we need to teach them. And that this thing of entitlement, we have to start it from when they're little. that no, you don't just get it because your parents have money and they can buy for you. That's good that they can, but that's not what makes you into a good person. What makes you into a good person is when you know how to put somebody else before you, when you know how to be thankful, when you know how to be grateful. You know, we don't want to be the one, oh, I raised that kid running into the store and grabbing everything off the shelf and hoarding, or I raised that kid that's driving the biggest vehicle and thinking he's better than everybody else and cutting people off. You know, we want to raise the mensch. We want to raise the woman that is sacrificial, that she knows how to be a giver and not a taker. Okay, and also we need to recognize the uniqueness in our child and to try to train them up in the way they should go so that they just blossom into who they're meant to be. And so when they come with their offering or with their sacrifice, it's out of, you know, out of this place of uniqueness and becoming who they're really meant to be and reaching their full potential. And also, you know, lastly, to always be charitable, to be a giver. Okay, so surprise, surprise, in the book of Leviticus, we learn very practical application. You know, it's a book of instructions and details. And here we are at this time in our life. Isn't everything that you see now about this is how you do it, this is the instructions, here you better keep these laws, and you better keep these rules, and here's how you do it, and for your own safety. And it's like the whole book of Leviticus is about instructions and laws, and here's how you do it. And so it's just, we're just right in step in our Torah portion with what's going on in the news. Okay, so yeah, we're all supposed to get a glass of wine and go to our virtual birthday party. So I'm looking forward to that. It was great to be with you guys again, and try to just, you know, this week, doesn't it seem like when we're out of control of so many things, I don't know, for me, like I was like cleaning out drawers. I was just doing things like, there's certain things I do have control over, right? When I get up in the daytime, I just have control over my little space that I'm living in. And so one of the things, if you have little children at your house, this is the time to pour into them, to train them, to teach them about being sacrificial, about having gratitude, about sharing, giving, being givers and not takers. So this is, you know, there's good that can come out of all this time that we have in the home with our kids now. Okay, that's all for now. Many, many blessings to all of you. Stay well. See you next time. Shalom from Israel.